Okay, I can see ourselves moving towards having a particularly sensible episode where I get to talk about money and relationships, and it'll be one of those episodes where I feel like the women might probably benefit from hearing it more. Although this one is kind of like how a guy feels type of situation. Because for a lot of what I'll be saying about the guys, a lot of it comes from, the internals of being a guy and, some of the struggles that we go through. And because I said sensible, I know there's someone that's going to think that it's going to be a boring episode, which I don't think it is. Although, for the sake of trying to disprove all of that, let me throw something a little wild into the works before we can get to most of the sensible shit. And that requires me looking into some of the wildest stories that turn up from the US of A. And the story that we have here is of a Texas nurse who was recently arrested after videos were found on her husband's phone of her having sex with a Great Dane. She was at... Okay, I don't know which one is weird here because, there's a couple of things I need to process. Okay, she was having sex with a Great Dane. That's wild in and of itself. And recording them on video is wild as well in and of itself because that's not footage that I'd ever want anyone to have of me, even though I was interested in Great Danes like that. But the wilder part out of it is the videos weren't found on her phone, they were on her husband's phone. And I honestly don't know how to feel about that. Although, I'm not gonna lie, when I actually read this story the very first time, and I was busy thinking of all the wild things that could possibly be said about this, one very interesting thought stood out of all of the others, and it goes, bow wow wow yippee yo yippee yay, where my dogs at?
The royal penis is clean, your highness.
I can get how wild all of this is, but the thing I'm still trying to process is the fact that they were on the husband's phone. I can get if they were on the wife's phone and it's the wife who recorded them and, that makes a bunch of sense. It's very dumb, but it still makes a bunch of sense. But they were on the husband's phone. And frankly, considering that someone did actually post up a photo of the Great Dane, which is black, I'm actually very curious as to whether this guy was using it for pleasure and shit and all, although his story is also pretty wild. But anyways, let me just read the story that came with this entire post, which says, and I quote, "A Texas nurse has been arrested after explicit videos were discovered on her husband's phone showing her engaging in inappropriate activities with her Great Dane. William Mitchell Keene was apprehended for engaging in inappropriate behavior at a Texas supermarket. Upon confiscating his phone, the police discovered deeply unsettling videos of his wife involved in intimate acts with a family dog. According to the police, the phone contained a significant number of disturbing videos and photos. Authorities conducted a search at the residence of Keene and his wife Jolie, removing their children aged 18 and 10, as well as their 3 dogs. Jolie faced charges related to bestiality, while Mitchell faced charges related to possessing child pornography." End quote. Okay, this now made things even a little bit wilder, because, when I was kind of looking at this story, it was kind of just shallow bits off the top. The title seemed pretty nice. But, let me get this straight. The wife looked at the family dog and said, fuck it, in every literal sense of the term. And the husband looked at it and decided to record videos while looking at some kids and was like, you know what, fuck them too. This in and of itself is very, very wild, especially considering that they have kids. And when did they discover that they suddenly had an interest for, the peculiar things that they do? Because I find it very weird that you'd find someone who's just seated at home and then looks at the family dog and it's a Great Dane and is like, you know what? I'd want to get that dog in me. It actually seems a little bit wild, but I don't know. All of this seems very, very odd. It seems very weird. And besides these guys facing the force of the law and everything, I feel like everyone in that family needs therapy. Dogs included, especially considering that, during mating season, one of them might have wanted the Great Dane and was getting cock-blocked by a human being. That shit is wild though. Although, cocks and dogs aside, I do have a podcast that is about human beings, which I need to get to by starting in a much less wild way by saying, welcome to the Breaktime Podcast, where I talk about love, sex, and relationships from a guy's perspective, as well as a bunch of other guy shit. The man on the mic is a man who loves doggy style, the position with women. He's a man who believes that running your mouth should be a part of your cardio routine. It is none other than your tall, dark, and mildly handsome man, Sir Denver B. This episode has started in such a wild way that I don't think it can get any worse from here. Just mostly because I don't think I have. Actually, I know for a fact that there's no one that's gonna be fucking a dog for the rest of this episode. The whole screwing kids thing, we'll kind of get to that. That one's coming, but in a more sensible way. But all in all, thank you so much for listening to this podcast. I hope you listen all the way till the end. I hope you do get entertained, or at least you learn something, if not both. And interestingly enough, we're 10 episodes away from 500 episodes being done on this podcast. 500! Do you know how wild that is? I personally don't, because I haven't clocked 500 episodes on anything, or even 500 of a lot of things. So I'm looking forward to that. I hope you'll stick around for the journey and continue past the 500 as, we work towards it and exceed it and try and make things better. And whatever feedback you have, if you want to suggest topics, then the links to the social media are all down below in the description. And, for the sake of time, I don't want to start mentioning all of them. So I'll kind of just leave it at that and kind of move things on, because we have a main topic that I need to get to, which involves money. But before I can do any of that, I need to address the whole screwing kids thing for a little bit. Now, it's not exactly screwing kids per se, but it's people being screwed out of their future because of university education and shit, and it's something that people have spoken about before. Now, that became a particular topic of discussion online this past week, and it was all because someone on Facebook decided to post up some photos of a friend of his who was busy graduating, or at least had a photo with a graduation gown on, and he had laid on the floor all of his academic certificates, and he was holding on to one, and there was a talk of him supposedly trying to get a PhD. Now, the caption that the guy had put was, and I quote, "A Kenyan man by the name Alson Manyama parades all his academic papers as he aims for a PhD in 2025. Says he hasn't secured any job opportunity yet. He says he feels wasted completely and desperate." End quote. And this guy's photos actually ended up going viral. They were trending for a couple of days, and people now started bringing up this whole discussion of people going to university and whether it's useful or not in today's day and age. And there's an influencer by the name of Wilson Mushemi, who usually posts up a couple of funny videos, who decided to speak on it, and he said, and I quote, "Why study this much? Just so you can waste money on school fees and sit jobless? My best advice to fellow uni students, find a hustle while you read and build your hustle to the point where you can survive on it. University can be a waste of time sometimes." End quote. Now, he had posted this on his stories, and it ended up being picked up by a gossip site who decided to float it around a little bit, and people were busy talking, commenting on it. And a lot of people were busy talking about how university nowadays is pointless, it doesn't make sense for people to go. And even at some point, the comedian known as Eric Omondi decided to sort of chime in on it, and he commented and said, "If you have college fees, use that money to open something you're passionate at, create income, and use it to go to college while your business grows." And it's not a bad idea. It's just, I feel like when you go to a point where you're saying something this extreme, I personally feel like there's a lot of people who have zero idea of the realities of a lot of people. First of all, the whole chasing your passion thing, I will say this as someone who has been out of university for close to 5 years, not a particularly solid piece of advice. First of all, for a lot of people, a lot of what they consider a passion isn't a profit maker, and even though they could get something that's a profit maker, the amount of time it takes to be particularly good or stand out in whatever industry or sector you're in takes time, and you're not always guaranteed that you're going to get positive results. So in a vacuum, this advice isn't too bad in theory, really, but in reality, it's not really all that great. Now, reading what Wilson Mushemi said, it's actually pretty solid advice, especially since he hasn't given proper timelines and shit. It's actually not bad. It's actually fairly accurate, and it's something that I'd probably tell people. I wouldn't go the hustle route, because I don't think everyone can start a business, or at least I don't think most people have the capabilities and qualities to run a business to a successful level. But for the most part, considering that, the whole hustle thing is mostly related to business, if you can open it up to more than just that, you're pretty good to go. And while I may not be as digitally successful as Wilson Mushemi, I feel like I probably have a little bit of a more accurate idea on how to make it through the whole uni thing towards getting a pretty good job, because I sort of thought about it, mapped it out in and around the time when I was finishing university to when I even finished university, and I sort of learned that if you actually want to come out pretty successful with a degree, then when you go to university, which I believe is very important and most if not all people should go, you go and you take your first 1 to 2 years enjoying the fuck out of uni. Go learn a couple of new things, make some new friends, enjoy life, enjoy what it's like to have that much freedom and that little responsibility, because you probably won't get that opportunity to enjoy it like that at any point in time after you are done with university. So enjoy it to the absolute fucking max. The next year to year and a half, maybe at max 2 years, enjoy the fuck out of uni, all right? Then somewhere within your second year to the beginning of your third year, go and find a company or companies that specialize in the particular industry that you want to be in or the particular profession you want to be in, and look into working there for a bit, whether it's volunteered, whether it's paid for, whether as an intern or just through some sort of mentorship of sorts, and see if you can get taken in and start working. I would much rather you do that before you get to your fourth year, because when you get to your fourth year and you're looking for an actual internship at that point in time, the kind of treatment is going to be very different, because at that point it's almost like, you know, you're trying to do the work so that you can get your degree and possibly nail down a job. So it's almost like you need to do it. But in your second or third year, it seems more like you've kind of taken yourself because you want to learn more. So the treatment might be particularly different. In some places, that difference can mean that, you know, you might be right next to the side of someone who's particularly well versed in that industry, or, you know, you're being treated like a reusable condom because you're the intern, and so you're going to get all of the work that people don't want to do. And, you know, that difference can be particularly big and it can be particularly good. Plus, at the end of it, when you're done with your degree, you'll have like 2, maybe 3 years of work experience, which you can put on your CV and nail yourself a pretty good job fresh out the jump. So if you choose to leave that company, if you choose to stay there, you'll at least have some tangible value that you can put on your resume that can assist you in getting a much better job. And honestly, if you're in uni, this is probably the blueprint that I'd give you to being successful in the workplace if you're not going to go and start a business somewhere in your second or third year. But all in all, then again, you know, the last time I was in university is almost 5 years ago. So, you know, maybe my information is a little bit dated. But either way, I am going to leave it at that and move it on to our main topic of this episode, which involves a particularly interesting story which makes you question, or at least makes a lot of us guys question, if we are ever going to be valued beyond more than just what we can produce. Now, granted, men are desired for being resourceful, and being resourceful is a good thing. But this whole having to be able to produce every single time is starting to become a bit of an issue for us. Now, there's a story that I found on Reddit over the weekend, which I found to be particularly interesting. So I'm just gonna read it for you. The title is, "Should You Be Broke to Find Genuine Attraction?" And the guy wrote, and I quote, "Context. An ex called me to her place saying she misses me and she needs some proper quote-unquote servicing. I go to her place where I find her with her cousin and nephew. She starts telling them that we're back together and how she loves me, blah blah. Anyways, they leave and I get to business. Afterwards, I ask her why it's so quiet. This is about 3 p.m. and it's actually because the tokens are finished and she's broke. This is the point she starts asking for favors about me paying for electricity, to which I say okay, but a bit hesitantly. I do the thing, which was just 500 bob, and I give her my phone. As she's inputting the code, she looks at my M-Pesa balance, then she blurts out that the Lord sends you to me whenever I'm usually in trouble, as if she wasn't the one who called me for sex. She starts saying about how she doesn't have shopping, her sister is in a jam and she needs cash, and how she's tired of Thika Road and wants to move along Kiambu Road at my expense. At this point, I know why she called me to her place, because she needed help and she didn't really miss me. My stupid self was thinking she came up to her senses and wanted to mend things, but wapi. I refused to give her any more money. She gets mad since I had around 84 Gs and I leave. 3 weeks later, I call her and she confirms my thoughts. She wanted cash and knew there's no way I'd give her anything if she just simply asked for it, which is true. Left me wondering if we would have had a relationship at all from the beginning if there was no money involved." End quote. Now, having read this story, I decided to look through the comments first because I didn't want to think too much about it. Maybe this is just a shorty that, tried to take advantage of a dude. But at some point, the guy actually did explain that the relationship was good. But at one point, when she was going through some financial troubles, he helped her with rent. She didn't realize that the guy made this much money. And after the guy kind of poured money like that, suddenly she saw that she had a cash cow and, she decided to sort of try and take advantage of it, which didn't go down particularly well. But now, looking at the comments, I actually noticed that there was a bit of a pattern that people were having in relation to the kind of comments that they were giving. So there was a woman who came out and said, you don't have to be broke to find genuine attraction. You just have to be a little bit more discerning, e.g. building up on the way you spend on someone the closer you grow. Because if you lead with what you have, people might only stick around for just the things. Instead, try and lead with who you are, talk, share, spend low budget at first. Something you're comfortable quote unquote losing in case things don't go further. The good thing is you have experience of what it's like when someone just wants cash, so you'll be able to spot the red flags better next time. We live and we learn. End quote. Which actually wasn't bad. That's actually the comment that brought about the whole, in the beginning the relationship seemed pretty good. To which she added in another comment later on that unfortunately we women sometimes believe in the fairy tale that a man will swoop in and save us from having to work for a living, end quote, which to be honest actually does sound like how a lot of babes seem to be sounding on social media right now, and they're busy saying I just want a man that can take care of the bills and I can just chill and stay at home, which to be honest I don't think most of you are going to get that. But I don't want to sound pessimistic. I hope you do, but it is something that I have noticed a lot of women having. But with a lot of the guys, they were actually talking about how as a man you'll be loved for how you provide or for what you provide. So you're always going to have to provide as a man. And also they talk about how like if it's sex, you're always going to be paying for it in some way or the other, which is something that does carry quite a lot of weight. It's not something that I'm able to refute as often as well, because apparently as a guy you're always going to be paying for something with something over a certain period of time, depending on whenever you're going to have sex with a woman. But with all of that said, I think the one comment that stood out to me from the guys was actually one where some guy said, and I quote, "There's always a reason why as a man it's only your mother who can love you unconditionally. Love from any other woman is attached to a value that she can siphon from you either currently or prospectively." End quote. Which actually goes back to something Chris Rock once said during a comedy special where he stated, "Women, children and dogs are loved unconditionally." If I find the clip, I'll be sure to put it right here.
Only women, children and dogs are loved unconditionally. A man is only loved under the condition that he provides something.
And it's things like this that show that guys are valued for their resourcefulness, we're loved for our resourcefulness. And fortunate or unfortunate, it is something that a lot of guys kind of learn over time and they kind of have to come to terms with. Although this is something that I will get back into a little bit later, because there is something to be said about this and the idea of unconditional love. But I will deal with that in a little bit, because first of all I wanted to talk about something that I like to refer to as the money man paradox. Now it's something that I completely came up with on my own, and it sort of just explains this whole situation that a lot of guys are in, especially right now, which is a bit of a paradox, a bit of a wild conundrum for a lot of us guys whenever it comes to us trying to find a particularly good partner, because everyone wants to be loved for who they are, not necessarily for what they bring, and this is something that guys sort of have to fight with. So the way I explain the money man paradox is, when you're a man who doesn't have money, you're not a money man, so you're not able to attract the women that you'd want, you're not able to get a lot of options or any good quality partners because you're a man with no money. But when you get money and you do become the money man, you suddenly have all of these options of all of these women who want to be with you. But the unfortunate reality is a lot of them tend to be very low quality, and you suffer the risk of being with someone who only wants to be with you because of your money. Now, the only way to discern that is if the money man stops becoming the money man, so he doesn't have money, which can lead to the woman leaving or staying, of which at that point you discover that the only way that you, the money man, can discover if you have a good partner is if you're no longer the money man, which kind of throws you back into the original loop whereby if you're not the money man, then you're not going to be attracting any women. So not unless if you are the money man, you will be attracting women. And at that point now you kind of have to do the whole filtering thing again and again, of which it does kind of paint a pretty clear picture for a lot of guys, especially guys that make money, because a lot of them who do want a good quality partner, but they can't trust that the person they're with isn't with them because of the money. And there's a lot of women that will talk about, we're usually not just with a guy because of the money. You guys need to go and touch grass. We're not all money hungry gold diggers, blah blah. To which you probably are saying the truth. It's just that a man's financial stability does carry quite a lot of weight with a lot of the women whenever they're getting into the dating market right now. And yes, you could talk about, if it's a financially stable woman, it won't matter to them as much, blah blah. And that's usually one of the bigger problems that comes up out of this, because you think that she doesn't have a problem. Maybe she's saying that she doesn't care if a man makes a shit ton of money or not, but she wants a man who's financially stable. Just about every woman wants a man who's financially stable. And by financially stable, it's like financially in the green, living well below your means. So you're making particularly good money, you have a bunch of savings, and you have some disposable income. And even though you can take away the savings part, having good disposable income and you're living a pretty good life is sort of almost like a prerequisite for just about every babe. So even though you are to bring in the whole financially stable woman, so him having a lot of money isn't a big issue, it still kind of just delays the inevitable for a lot of guys, because you find that there's a lot of cases where a woman is financially stable, a guy is financially stable, then when the guy kind of falls on hard times, maybe he lost a job, maybe his business went under, you find that the financially stable woman suddenly starts to treat him like shit, because the guy hasn't picked up a job or the guy isn't making money, and she's handled the bills for like maybe a couple of weeks, maybe a couple of months even, and at that point she seems very pissed off, very fed up with the guy. It's like there's always problems that are arising. It's like the guy breathing in the wrong direction is a crime and shit, and then dude ends up being left, or dude ends up living a particularly miserable life in the relationship. So at the end of the day, like, a financially stable woman at that point just kind of becomes a delay or a buffer towards finding out whether the whole money man situation is true or not. But it doesn't necessarily mean that every woman is interested in a guy for his finances, but there's a lot more women today that care about a man's financial stability than ever before. And that will almost always take most guys through the money man paradox, because we want to find a good quality woman, but finding a good quality woman when you have money, especially if you have a lot of money, is actually pretty hard, which kind of goes back to the whole men being required to be resourceful all the time and a man being valued for his resources. Like, whether we like it or we don't, if you kind of think about the Chris Rock quote, it actually does carry a lot of weight here. Because we are loved on condition that we are resourceful. We are loved on condition that we provide. Except that that's how we as men always look at it, because we're looking at it from the lens of a man. But if you try to look at it from a more gender neutral lens, you realize that the concept of unconditional love is in and of itself near impossible, if not near improbable, for most people with someone that isn't their parent or their child. Because when you think about it, to a certain degree, we are all loved romantically on condition. We sort of have to fulfill a certain level of condition to be loved romantically, and that condition usually has to bring value. Because when you kind of think about it, if a man is loved for his resourcefulness and what he can produce as a resourceful person, then he's loved on the condition that he provides, or at least that he's resourceful. But on the other hand, if you look at women, a lot of them are loved based on the condition that they fulfill a certain number of check boxes that a lot of guys want with a person that they'd want to be with. So this woman is probably beautiful, and she's caring, and she speaks to him nicely, and she gives him peace, and she rides him properly. Like, a bunch of those things kind of have to be fulfilled to a certain degree for the guy to love this woman. So now the question is, if for example, God forbid, she gets into an accident and her face is all messed up, are you still going to love this woman with whatever scarring or with whatever issues she's had? Or will you suddenly leave, or will you stick with her because you feel like you're obligated to stick to her because you were with her before the accident, but now you instead decide to go and philander around and cheat with a bunch of other women? Like, that now becomes the new condition. Is it that she can do this or because she can? Or for example, God forbid, she becomes paraplegic, so she can't walk. Will you still continue to be with her in the midst of all of those challenges? So to a certain degree, like, even on a slightly wilder note, if, for example, this very beautiful looking woman is told by this man that, she's been with, that he loves her and he loves her unconditionally, but this is a chick that went and got a BBL and he likes babes with a nice ass, preferably something with a BBL, can't you say that she's loved based on the fact that she has a big ass? Or can't you say that she's loved based on the fact that she got a BBL? So in that case, doesn't it contradict the whole unconditional love belief that's out there? Like, essentially, at that point, it kind of becomes a little bit harder to discern the whole conditional, unconditional love thing. To which I'd probably rephrase the word from unconditional love to unacquirable love, because I feel like unacquirable love seems more accurate to most people as opposed to unconditional love. Because when you think about it, for a lot of us guys, like, we will love a babe even though she can't cook or clean, even though she probably doesn't ride us the best. Actually, there was a video online where a guy said that he knew he loved his babe because the pussy is trash and he still doesn't want to leave her. So essentially, like, it's nothing that's been acquired, it's what she is as a person and what she has in terms of stuff like personality, beauty and shit that she was probably born with and has gotten through, let's say, genetics, as opposed to acquirable love, which is now acquired via you making a bunch of money, getting a BBL, making yourself look a certain way, because you have to acquire that look, you have to acquire the BBL, you have to acquire that money so that you can be loved. So I feel like it's more of an unacquirable versus acquirable love situation as opposed to unconditional versus conditional, which kind of brings me to the conclusion to all of this. Now, to kind of explain why guys are so against this whole women want a man because of money thing, I think women need to understand something that a lot of guys kind of feel whenever we get that. And it's taken me a while to sort of try and put it into words, but I think this is the closest that I can get. When a man is loved because of what he has or what he can produce in terms of money, it almost feels like we now have to produce that money all the time. We always have to make sure we have that money for us to be loved. It's like we're wearing a bomb vest, and the agreement is we either continue producing or they let the trigger go and everything explodes. So it's like you wake up every single day, and if you've ever watched 24, the series, there's that tone that they usually have. I'll see if I can put it in the background, where it's like, you have to produce, or if you stop producing, or if you don't get there, the bomb is gonna go off and we're all of a sudden going to lose our love and our value is going to be meaningless. So we have to continue running that treadmill. We have to continue getting up and putting in that effort because our ability to be loved depends on it, which isn't a good way to live, which isn't a good feeling to have, especially if you don't have money. But even if you do, like, you just don't want to feel like you're only loved for what it is that you can produce. And it's something that not unless if that's all you feel you can give, most guys don't really like. Although, then again, I might be wrong about this or a lot of other shit in this entire episode, so I want your thoughts on it. The DMs are open. On IG, it is at the Breaktime_podcast. On Facebook, it is at the Breaktime Podcast. And on X, it is at Bagaka the D. Thank you so much for listening all the way till the end, and I will catch you guys on the next break.
But what I believe is that if you put a pastor and a prostitute in one room, one is likely to convert the other.